Hey everybody, welcome back to your comm class. And today we're talking about something that's critical to great communication. And it's not emails, it's not how to write a letter, it's not how to write anything or say anything, it's how to think, which another way of saying this is critical thinking. If you're not able to formulate a coherent argument in your mind, then how can you communicate it, right? And what does critical thinking mean? Well, I mean, critical. Another way of saying this is to make a judgment on something. So you're being very particular about the information you receive and analyzing it. And so in critical thinking, one of the best things you can do is be a little bit wary. Ask questions. Don't take anything for granted. This is how you avoid getting duped or played. This is how you know what's true and what's not. And so today we're doing a little bit of a lesson on essentially it's a lead up to our research paper, but really the larger issue here is how to determine argument from opinion and fact versus feelings. They're definitely not the same. They all have their proper place in our lives, but when we're talking about making an argument, you want to be using some facts rather than some opinions or feelings. Moving on. Okay, so normally we do this discussion in class and you'd write it down, but instead of that, on your own, why don't you take some time on your own to write some answers to these questions? I really want you to think about this because these are important questions. So, number one, what tools do you use to do your research? I'm sure you've done research papers before or just research in general. What are you using for tools? Is it just the internet? Is it books? Curious to know. Send me an email if you like. What are the pros and cons of using Google? Google is an amazingly wonderful tool. You can have access to billions and billions of websites with lots and lots of information. But there's also maybe a lot of bad information out there. You know, some people would say maybe 90% of information on Google is not very high quality. I don't know what the reality is. Nobody knows. Wikipedia, hey, this is a great thing. Again, I donate to them every year. I think it's a wonderful thing that we're, compiling human knowledge, on a scale way beyond any print encyclopedia. But again, who can edit Wikipedia? It's interesting to think about that. So if you're using only Wikipedia, we might want to ask questions about that. Where do you get your news? I know with me, I'm not watching cable news anymore. I haven't had it for years. I'm not. I don't subscribe to any magazines really or papers. I do go check some news sites, but you can't help but see a lot of headlines wherever you go, whether it's in passing on a TV screen or on your phone or on Facebook or something like that. Where do you get your news? Think about that. And the last question I'll ask you is, what is fake news? We hear this term a lot. It comes along sometimes with alternative facts, which of course is a misnomer. It's not possible to have alternative facts. Facts are facts. There are no different options on facts. That's why they're facts. They're the truth. Is fake news dangerous or mainly harmless? Well, think back to the recent U.S. election and what fake news might have played in that election. Just take a few minutes to think about this. If you want to pause the video, go ahead. Otherwise, let's carry on. So, question for you: how did Donald Trump get elected in 2016? Many people will say different things, but I would say there were four main factors. So, number one, the economy in the United States. It wasn't great. For years, a lot of America's manufacturing has been going overseas. Many jobs lost. Automation is increasing, and so people just don't have the jobs, especially people with not so much education, right? You can automate mostly things that are manual labor, factory jobs, etc. A lot of people were hurting. And since the 70s, I think it is, wealth inequality has been increasing. The difference between rich and poor, the gap is getting much bigger. I think it's at an unsustainable level, but that's just my opinion. Unemployment has been very high, especially when COVID hit. Unemployment took a massive uptick, and so what was happening in around 2016? Some of these things, and Trump seemed to be the guy that was telling it like it is, right? Say what you will about Trump, he was, well, I don't even know if you can say a straight talker, but he appealed to the masses. He appealed to people with generally low education and the working class and a good portion of the population. Not the majority of Americans, but a good portion, enough to get elected. Prejudice. Unfortunately, we know that in most places, and if not all in the world, there are people with prejudices, people with maybe even who are racist, people who are not so well traveled and exposed to different people than the people in their own very close and small circle, people that don't travel 5 kilometers from their home. I think it's fair to say that most of Middle America, which we're talking about the middle of the country geographically, is white. And Trump was able to blame a lot of America's problems on foreigners, on especially Muslims, because of what happened with the 9/11 attacks that still was reverberating. And, was able to say foreigners are taking US jobs. Which I don't know if that's true or not, but he regardless, he was able to take some of this anger and angst and translate it into votes for him, right? A lot of people are scared of things they don't understand. It's called xenophobia, right? If we don't know a person from a certain country, we might have certain biases about them that are unfounded and untrue. And for a lot of people who are uneducated and in this category of not being very worldly, there's no such thing as white privilege. White privilege is just, hey, I'm entitled to this country. It's my country. And so they wanted it back. They felt that a lot of foreigners and people that didn't look like them were taking it over, right? So Trump promised that he'd be the solution, right? Handy that he was a white guy. Another thing about democracy and politics, it's a very complicated issue, but basically, not a lot of people vote on the whole, right? So the people that are eligible, many of them are unengaged, and even the ones that vote, probably not very informed. I have family members that voted against certain politicians because they didn't like their hair, right? And that's probably not a good thing for democracy. Voter turnout in that election, 2016, of eligible Americans was only 55% of the population. Terrible, disgusting, right? And the other 45%, they were not engaged. They were not involved. They might have been, shouting on Twitter or on Facebook, but they didn't actually get out and vote. So, unfortunately, with politics, when you're able to motivate the most angry people, you're able to get a lot of votes, which is maybe what happened. By the way, Canada not doing too much better. In our last election, 2019, it was 66%, and 68% was the high in 2015. So still a lot of people not voting, mostly not because they don't think it matters, but mostly because they're maybe disengaged. They're too busy with other important things, right? And the final reason I believe that Trump got elected was the media. The media quality has taken a very, very sharp dive over the last several decades. It used to be that the agreement was, hey, we're going to give NBS and CBC and all those news outlets a part of the radio waves and the airwaves of TV, right? Because everything used to be on radio waves. And in exchange, you got to kind of tell the news, right? It was a prestigious thing to have the best quality, highest quality journalism on your news station. That definitely is not the case anymore. A lot of very, very wealthy people control the media, have purchased these news outlets, not because they're making a profit necessarily, but because they maybe have a political agenda to push, right? Again, my opinion here, but take it as you will. So the problem is the quality of media has severely declined. There's not as much money in the system. People are getting a lot of free news online. So they're not paying for newspapers. They're not paying for subscriptions to news channels. And so guess what? We have conspiracy theories, false reports that aren't true, missing coverage, right? I mean, who knew that there was a major war in Yemen over the last little while? It's not really talked about, right? A lot of people are chasing other things that are not important, like reality TV, and then there's this tendency that people are getting more polarized. There's the left and the right, or the X and the Y, whatever you want to call it. People are generally on opposite sides of issues, and I don't know why that is, but it's definitely become a major divide between groups of people, and people are getting very, very, first of all, insular. They're not hearing the other side, and very, very passionate about these things, right? You could say that maybe certain interest groups are pushing these interests, or maybe it's related to the Facebook algorithm. I don't know. So anyway, the problem basically is that the media is not really being objective and unbiased. Same problem exists on the left and the right. CNN, not exactly unbiased. Fox News, definitely not unbiased. So we have problems on both sides. Facts have suffered. Four major issues that impede critical thinking, all right? So again, part of your university or your college education is to learn the skills that will get you a great job, right? For sure. You're not doing this for nothing. You're not doing this just for the intrinsic value. But there is intrinsic value in your education, and part of that is critical thinking. This is hopefully what your college education is teaching you. So let's look at a few factors that might hurt critical thinking. Facts versus feelings, social media and fake news, mainstream news for ratings, and then scientific studies that are not validated. Remember the quotation mark lesson that we did? I'm using that intentionally here to suggest that they're not so scientific. Number one, who knows Isaac Asimov, right? Well, he's, I think, officially the most prolific writer, which means he's written the most out of any other author, any person in history. And he has this amazing quote: anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life. And by our, I think he's saying the United States, but we can apply this to the West in general. Nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge, right? You've met these people. They are not very intelligent. They're not very educated, but they believe in their opinions very, very strongly. And their opinion is just as good as yours, even if you have a PhD in the subject matter, according to them. So what is anti-intellectualism? It's basically this general distrust of people with an education, of the, what do you call the intelligentsia, right? The people that are educated. It's mistrust. It's, you know, this, it's cool that I'm kind of an everyday guy, right? That's fine if you want to be like that. But unfortunately, you're going to miss out on a lot if you are actually ignorant or pretending to be ignorant. Trump was seen as an anti-intellectual, right? Not seen as a very educated guy. He was probably the opposite of Barack Obama. Yeah, the opposite of a lot of people with, actual common sense. Obama was seen as the elite, right? He probably went to Harvard or some prestigious school like that. So let's take a look at how this plays out in practice. Here's a wonderful, wonderful video by Newt Gingrich, who is I believe a Republican senator. And this is an interview that CNN did with him in 2016. And they're talking basically about facts versus feelings. So let's just flip to the video on my friend YouTube.
Violent crime is down. The economy is ticking up.
It is not down in the biggest cities.
Violent crime murder rate is down.
So they're talking about violent crime in America, right? And now already they have a disagreement. So how do we solve a disagreement? Usually we look to the facts, right?
Then how come it's up in Chicago, up in Baltimore, and up in Washington?
There are pockets where certainly we have not tackled
your national
murder
capital, your third biggest city.
But violent crime across the country is down.
The average American, I will bet you this morning, does not think crime is down, does not think they are safer.
But it is. We are safer, and it is down.
No, that's your view. I just told no.
These are the national FBI facts.
But what I said is also what I said is also a fact.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's only a fact that that's a feeling people have. This is a graph of the violent crime rate. It's not a fucking Rorschach test. You can't infer anything you like from it. And sure, you can cherry pick recent upticks in some cities, but the overall trend across the country during the Obama presidency, and indeed for the last 25 years, is down. But Newt wasn't done.
So you all understand what's happening so far? Newt Gingrich and the reporter, they're debating this. Is violent crime up or down in America? The fact is down. It's been going down since 1990, right? We don't know, we don't care why in this specific case. It's just that it's going down on average. There are some pockets, of course, they're saying Chicago and elsewhere, but overall it's going down.
The current view is that liberals have a whole set of statistics which theoretically may be right, but it's not where human beings are.
But what you're saying is, but hold on, Mr. Speaker, because you're saying liberals use these numbers, they use this sort of magic math. This is the FBI statistics. They're not a liberal organization.
No,
they're a crime
but what I said is equally true. People feel more threatened.
Yes, they feel it, but the facts don't support it.
As a political candidate, I'll go with how people feel, and I'll let you go with the theoreticians.
Violent crime is down.
So we'll stop that there. let me just get out of here and go back to our slides. So what's the problem here? Think about it. What's the problem here? This is why people tend to have a negative view of politicians, right? Newt Gingrich here, who was the Speaker of the House, was saying that he doesn't care what the facts are. He's going with the people. If the people believe something to be true, he's going to be on their side, even if it's factually incorrect, right? This is what's happening in the United States right now and has been happening for a long time. This is what's been happening in democracies since the beginning of democracy, right? And happens a little bit more in less democratic places, right? The narrative is often changed to suit the need of the politicians, right? And if Newt's constituents, the people that vote for him, are saying that they feel very unsafe in their community, he's going to be sympathetic with that, even though crime is down overall, right? So this is a problem. This is illustrating the problem between fact and opinion, right? He's correct in saying that people feel that way. Well, actually, we don't know that. We should probably do the research to find out if he's correct. We will need to do some kind of poll, some kind of survey, right? To find out what people feel about this issue. But we can assume that most people are generally, afraid of crime, and they believe that there's a problem, even though the statistics say otherwise. So what's the second problem here? We've got, a muddling of fact versus opinion, but we also have this new phenomenon that's basically popped up in the last, I don't know, not more than a decade. And it's called fake news, right? Or alternative facts. What is fake news? It's news, like headlines that are showing up online or elsewhere, even in the mainstream media, that are absolutely false. How do we know they're false? Because we can fact check. We can go and look. A lot of the time you can tell fake news because it's totally obviously wrong and untrue. A lot of the times it looks credible, right? And even more often, a lot of people don't have the common sense to see it as fake news. So look at this. This is from, what year was this? This was top Facebook engagements for top 20 election stories. So this, I believe, was 2016. And it's showing us here how many election stories were out there. It's from Facebook. The source is BuzzSumo. So these were stories showing up on Facebook. How many were mainstream news? So that's your CNN, that's your New York Times, that's your Fox News, versus fake news. Fake news, and we're not talking like small little papers here. No, we're talking absolute BS, fabricated stuff. Sometimes it's a prank. Sometimes it's people trying to push their own agenda and convince you into doing something stupid. Look what's happened. Fake news actually overtook mainstream media news, at least on Facebook, by a factor, by more than a gap of 1 million stories by election day in the United States in 2016. That's a major problem, right? Because people are seeing this. And even if only 5% of them believe this fake news to be true, wow, we have now a whole swath of the population that is believing something that's completely false. Look at some other fake news stories here. Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump for president. The Pope would never endorse a political candidate, especially not Donald Trump. 960,000 people saw that story. WikiLeaks confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS, then drops another bombshell, right? Clickbait, pure click. 789,000 people saw that. It's clearly nonsense. It's not true that Hillary sold weapons to ISIS. It's over. Hillary's ISIS email just leaked, and it's worse than anyone could have imagined. Very vague, very damaging to Hillary, without any kind of substantive facts behind it. Just read the law. Hillary is disqualified from holding any federal office. It was not true. Then they're all kind of BS, right? Here we have another terrible statistic. 62% of US adults get their news from social media. It's not really that surprising, right? We're all on Facebook much more than we're on a credible news source, right? How do you define credible news source? It's kind of a subjective thing, but the organizations that have journalists that actually went to journalism school, they're more credible than the guy running a newspaper out of his basement, right? Conspiracy theory email or something. More than half of online users get news from Facebook, YouTube, and wherever else. Yeah, so this is becoming a trend toward people getting their news from Facebook, right? And let's be realistic. A lot of the times you only see the headline. You don't read behind the headline. And you certainly probably don't question, is this true? You just see the headline. It now becomes in your subconscious. You see it over and over and over again, and it starts to become true in your brain, even if not reality. Let's talk about an example of this. So, if you recall, in the lead up to the 2016 American election, there was this claim made that there was a child pedophilia ring being run out of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., right? This scandal was called Pizzagate. And allegedly, it was the Clintons that were sort of masterminding this child sex ring. Very convenient that Hillary was running for president, and this would very much damage her reputation. So what happened? A guy went in there with a gun and he started shooting. And the theory was that in the basement there was a network of tunnels where they were abusing children. Well, it turned out there was no basement. The cops came to arrest him. The cops did a full investigation. There was an FBI investigation, I believe. This conspiracy theory has been widely debunked. There was no such thing that ever happened. But it was conveniently timed right before the election, very much damaged Hillary's chances of getting elected, right? And by the way, it was only Democrats that were involved in this child sex ring. Very convenient. Now maybe you've heard of QAnon. QAnon is the second generation of Pizzagate. This is now a theory about satanic cannibals who are also running a child sex ring. It's allegedly includes a lot of Hollywood actors and Democratic politicians. No conservatives, of course, no Republicans. And there's prophecies involved, and Trump was supposed to be the savior. So this has motivated a lot of people. We're talking like probably in the millions of people, and they all believe that there's some kind of sex ring happening. Now, if you do any research on this, you'll realize that it's completely false. There was no such thing happening. This came out of a anonymous posting on a website called 4chan. If you know 4chan, 4chan is a place where mostly 14-year-old boys hang out and like talk trash. Not exactly a reputable news organization, right? And any news organization that have investigated, including Fox News, by the way, have said this is completely nonsense, right? And if you just hear what people say about this theory, it's quite bizarre. That's not to say that child abuse doesn't happen. You might remember the Jeffrey Epstein thing, very wealthy guy who was in fact running a pedophile ring, and he was arrested and he committed suicide in jail, right? He was only convicted on a few counts, but anyway, the point is this: fake news usually is most successful when it sounds a bit like the truth, right? So yes, there are child trafficking sex rings happening, but in the case of QAnon, it was not happening. It's not happening. So it really pays to do your research. A lot of people have been duped into believing something that's not true. Not just QAnon, but into many conspiracy theories. They seem to be taking off these days. So how do we get around fake news? And by the way, here's a quote about this. We prefer news in the digital form because it's convenient. But you get what you pay for. It takes money to do professional journalism. So this is true. We like to get our news from our phone and our computers because it's easy to get, right? It's also easy to produce. But if you want quality journalism, you got to pay a reporter, enough money that it's worth them going to school and actually spending, having a full-time job doing this, which is why, mainstream journalism has taken a dip in popularity. So what's happening? A lot of news is going online. Facebook is becoming a major distributor of news, 44% of people using it, and 19% getting their news from YouTube. What kind of quality are we talking about here? Hey, there's an article. Donald Trump tweets an image of his penis. Great subject matter, guys. Very high quality journalism, obviously. And by the way, no, that tweet never happened. But listen, nobody is vetting this stuff. I could post anything I want on Facebook right now, and it could go viral, and millions of people can be misled into believing that. People have done it on purpose. It's happened. People have said, "Oh, this actor has died, and major news outlets have picked that up. Meanwhile, the person's still alive. Another wonderful story here. I tried pot once. Now I'm gay. Yeah, deadly strain of marijuana turns users gay. Of course, the people that are very afraid of both pot and gay people, they will, see this headline and it'll reinforce their belief that we need to change things, right? And vote for Donald Trump. Obviously, there's no such thing as a strain of marijuana that can turn you gay. Are people really as dumb? Unfortunately, I have to say yes. There are millions and millions of people who are just not educated enough, or they're not critical thinking often enough to see through this nonsense. I hope you will start to see through this nonsense if you don't already. Clickbait, what's that? Well, it's a headline that performs really well on the internet. So look, weird things everyone just ignores about Hugh Jackman's marriage. Okay, he's still a very popular actor. A lot of people might click on that to find out what's going on. Why Hollywood won't cast John Cusack. Sad day, we say goodbye to Schwarzenegger after. What does that suggest? It suggests he died, right? Last I checked, he's still alive, right? Anyway, this is called clickbait. It gets you to click on the link to say, what is going on? What is this? You've probably seen a lot of this, and on reputable websites too. CNN, I think, has a plugin with at the bottom. There's like promoted articles, and they're all very strange sometimes. It used to be only that you could get this kind of news in the National Enquirer, which you buy at the supermarket checkout, right? And everyone knew that was a magazine for not so intelligent people, right? Now this stuff is everywhere. And why do people create clickbait? Money, right? Ad dollars. There are a lot of people that don't have any ethics and scruples, and so they're going to publish whatever they can to get you to click on it. Eyeballs equal money. Excuse me. Okay, third reason, mainstream news. I will say this, mainstream news is not in the business of news. They're in the business of entertainment. They're a business like any other in this day and age. And unfortunately, what is the news doesn't sell papers or eyeballs. What sells is sensationalism, right? So that's why there will be a story on CNN about how Donald Trump drinks 12 Diet Pepsis in a day. That's not news, but a lot of people will be like, oh my God, he drinks 12 Pepsis, and they'll watch that for like 2 hours, right? And of course, during that time, there's ads being played. Why did Donald Trump get elected? Well, in part, it was because he was very popular, right? He was a reality TV show celebrity, very wealthy guy. And unfortunately, stories about Donald Trump got clicked on. People were watching stories about Donald Trump. So even the left wing, the right wing, they were all putting out stories about Trump. Bernie Sanders too. Okay, fourth reason, false facts, which is, again, a misnomer. There's no such thing as false facts. The facts are the facts, right? But for this purpose of this argument, when we say a false fact, it's something that's presented as a fact, but it's not, right? And oftentimes these are wrapped up as scientific studies. Let's watch a few and see how bizarre they get. We won't watch the whole thing, just a few minutes.
Science. The thing we love and respect so much, we only allow scientists to be portrayed by the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Nicolas Cage, and Al Pacino. That is how much we respect them and the complexity of the work they do. Science is constantly producing new studies, as you would know if you've ever watched TV.
A new study shows how sugar might fuel the growth of cancer.
A new study shows late-night snacking could damage the part of your brain that creates and stores memories.
A new study finds pizza is the most addictive food in America.
A new study suggests hugging your dog is bad for your dog.
A new study showing that drinking a glass of red wine is just as good as spending an hour at the gym.
Now, I wish that were true because I like my wine, but obviously it's not true, right? You can't get the same effects as drinking a glass of red wine from as you would from working out, right? Anybody with half a brain would know that that's false. But unfortunately, a lot of people have less than half a brain. Sorry, I know I'm being harsh, but this is the unfortunate reality is a lot of people lack critical thinking. I want you to have it, so that's why we're doing this lecture. Moving on.
What? That last one? No! That last one doesn't even sound like science. It's more like something your sassy aunt would wear on a T-shirt. And when studies aren't blanketing TV, they're all over your Facebook feed with alerts like study finds Liberals are better than Conservatives at smizing, your cat might be thinking about killing you, and scientific study shows that bears engage in fellatio. And by the way, I'm not interested. Let me know when bears start engaging in some mutually pleasurable 69ing. Hashtag bear pleasure.
Okay, we'll call it there, right? It's getting ridiculous. The point of this is that there's a lot of nonsensical information out there, news, so-called news, that is, called a scientific study. Guess what? I write for magazines, and I don't need any credentials to use a scientific study. I try to do my best at giving good sources, but a lot of journalists might not. A lot of people, they're writing for $100 an article, and they're not going to do good work. So you got to be very, very careful about what kind of scientific studies you're using. I guess the key here is use your brain and ask questions and look for good sources and information. All right, back to our slides here. So what's the solution to all this? Okay, use your common sense, obviously, right? Now, of course, that only takes you so far because this is a subjective thing, right? We don't know if people have good common sense or they have bad common sense. Look at the tweet here. We will be at all high schools this Friday to either kidnap students or kill teachers going to their cars. Okay, this was some kind of hoax, but they're suggesting that they're so well organized that they'll be in every high school, presumably in America, to kidnap or kill people, right? Students and teachers. Common sense, is it even likely? Is it even possible to be that coordinated? I don't think so. There's a group called Ain't Clowning Around, seem like a credible threat. I don't know. I mean, of course, the police will have to take this seriously, but this probably caused a lot of fear in people that lack common sense. So that's one thing. Use critical thinking. What does it mean? It means judge it. Judgment is sometimes a very good thing. It's not great to judge people harshly oftentimes, but you should judge the information that's coming into your brain, right? Because you are really a culmination of what you let into your mind, right? If you're letting in nonsense, you're going to be spouting out nonsense. If you're letting good information, factual information, you'll be giving out good information. So use critical thinking. Verify sources. Who is saying this? Is it someone credible, like a scientist with a PhD and 20 years of researching this topic, or is it some joker that is maybe pulling a prank on you, like all of 4chan? So verify your sources. Who is it coming from? Consider the publication. Is it Fox News? If so, it's probably got a right-leaning bias. Is it CNN? Probably has a left-leaning bias, right? And by left and right, we mean of the political spectrum. So left is usually liberal and right is usually conservative. So consider the publication, and then just be active in your own learning. Don't take whatever you hear as gospel. Don't even think that if something is written down in a book. I have family members, again, who say, well, it's written right here. It's in this book, right? And mind you, anyone can publish a book these days. Anybody. It doesn't have to be quality. They don't have to know what they're talking about. So be very critical about what you read and see. Okay, opinion versus fact. Hopefully we all kind of have a general understanding of what that is, but let's recap. When you're researching and you're writing, by the way, we will be doing research for this upcoming research report. And when you're writing, avoid dealing with opinion, right? I think that, No, let's avoid that stuff in a research report. Instead, focus on statements that can be proven or supported with evidence, right? And we'll get into some examples later. Opinion is not as valuable it's not the same as argumentation. Your opinion is trees are bad for the environment, right? Sure, you can have your opinion, but that's not an argument. Trees are bad for the environment. Trees are bad for the environment because Okay, maybe now you can make an argument about it. Might not be a very good or solid argument, but you're making an argument based on some kind of supporting evidence, right? Whereas an opinion is just, I don't like the color blue, right? That's your opinion. Opinions are statements of personal preference, like I don't like the shirt you're wearing. That's subjective and unprovable. You can't prove that I don't like your shirt because there's nothing to prove there. It's not a yes or no. Arguments are objective statements supported by evidence. So I don't like the shirt you're wearing because it was produced in a sweatshop and it's using materials that are bad for the environment and it's highly flammable and you work in a match factory. Okay, maybe now you've got an argument that you can support with evidence, but that's not an opinion. Let's take a look at an example. First statement, Lady Gaga is stupid, right? That is an opinion. It is not an argument. There's nothing, you're not making an argument there. You're just saying some stuff. But in number two, in the case here, despite Lady Gaga's unconventional image, her music is incredibly commercial. So let's parse this a little bit. Does Lady Gaga have an unconventional image? I think the pictures here speak for themselves. Yes, it's verifiable by evidence. She's wearing a dress of Muppets there. And then the next one, it's a dress of what looks like meat. So yeah, that's fairly unconventional. You can make a convincing argument for that. Her music is incredibly commercial. What does that mean? Well, commercial usually means that it makes money. Does her music make money? Hell yes. So that's a pretty convincing argument. It's not the same as an opinion. So please feel free to use arguments in your papers. Absolutely, that's kind of why we're here. But support them with things that we can prove or support with facts. Again here, opinion versus facts. So PS4 is great and Xbox sucks. If you make that argument anywhere, you're going to sound like a doofus, right? Whereas if you say something like the PS4 is a better investment because of its large amount of high quality exclusive titles. Okay, now this is an argument. It's not just an opinion. Does it have a large amount of high quality exclusive titles? Apparently it does. It's a fact, right? There's no questioning that. So then you could say, because there's more games you can play, it's a better investment. You get more value for your money, right? It's still an opinion, but now you're taking it to the next step, making an argument supported by some facts. Okay, last thing I'll say is avoid value judgments and avoid bias, right? Value judgments are really just judgments about the value of something, right? They're hasty generalizations. Stereotypes fit into this category. They often contain a small grain of truth, right? But ignore the larger picture. So anytime you make a generalization about an ethnic group, about a gender, about a whatever type of food, you're probably drawing a stereotype. There might be some truth in it, but it's not really fair or accurate to generalize to the entire group, right? Or the entire subset, because it ignores a lot of exceptions. So when you're doing research, be critical. Think, is this good or is this bad? Judge the information that you're using. Acknowledge all sides of the argument, right? But focus on the truth. So an example of this is climate change. There are two opinions on this. One is that humankind is creating climate change, and the other says, no, we're not. Some people on the fringes say there's no such thing as climate change. Unfortunately, facts don't support that. Now, okay, are we causing it or are we not? Well, let's look at the facts. So 99% of scientists and more basically say, yes, we're causing it. There may be debate about how quickly it's happening, but yes, humans are causing climate change. We're producing carbon and other greenhouse gases. It's raising the temperature of the environment. It's slowly melting the ice caps. The water's going to rise. Billions of people will be without homes in the next 50 years, right? If we don't do something. And then there are this fringe group of people that say no, climate change is not caused by humans, right? What's their evidence? It's these one or two studies. Usually they're not really great with great supporting facts. But see, a lot of places, especially the mainstream media, has treated this as like there's an equal debate, right? It's not 50-50. It's 99-1. 99 scientists say it is happening, and one says it's not. So this is exactly what I'm talking about with critical thinking. Be critical. Don't treat all opinions equally. Don't treat all sides equally. You have to sometimes make a value judgment. in certain cases. But usually it's best to be objective, okay? So the whole purpose of this lesson was to help you think critically. And how is it going to play out in this course? I'd love for you to use very respected quality sources that are from maybe scientifically supported, that are factual. I want you to avoid fake news. I want you, in your general life as well as in this course, I'd like for you to avoid just terrible quality research in general, okay? So we're gonna do a lesson on research in the future, but for today, I just want you to start thinking about thinking critically, okay? Thanks, and we'll continue in another video soon. Have a good one.